Welcome to my tutorial on how to draw Celtic Knotwork. Step 1. Draw some swirls. At this stage, you don't really have to be perfect with your drawing. It's okay if it's kind of wobbly and not really refined, because we're going to be erasing and redoing these parts a lot, but you want the general shapes to be as even as you can. So when you have a basic shape, you can then add in little details if you feel like a part of the drawing is kind of empty. I like to look at the negative space and kind of fill it in with something interesting. Here I started an idea and I was like, no, I don't really like that, so I just erased it. But I decided that I liked parts of it. I really wanted that space in between the triangle to be filled in, so I just made these little kind of fish heads that came down in there. Alright, so now, step 2, we're going to thicken these lines. So when you're thickening these lines, you can go on the outside of your initial line, you can go on the inside of it, or you can go somewhere in between. You can even change where on the line you are as you go along. This is a chance for you to kind of refine the spacing. A really important part of Celtic Knotwork, and something that kind of guides me in making designs that look finished and professional, is to just make sure that the spacing between everything is even. You really want all of the spaces between your lines to be as even as possible. So as I'm doing this process of thickening, I'm adjusting the lines so that they're evenly spaced from each other. Some of your lines can be thinner, some of them can be thicker. A lot of times it looks really good to have thin lines that cross over thick lines, or that are doubling a thicker line that's next to it. You'll also notice that I'm not trying to make the overlapping effect at this point. I'm just passing my lines straight through each other at those intersection points. We're going to be adding in the overlap later, but for now we want to make sure that our design is really even, that our lines are the same thickness, and I find that when you try to do the overlap effect before, then you end up with a line starting on one side as a little bit thinner, and then at the end it'll be a little bit thicker or something. It's just much better to make sure that you have smooth and even lines at this point. So when I started doing these outer loops, I kind of noticed that my inner loops inside were not the same size. So this was a good opportunity for me to redo that one to make sure that it matched the other side. Another thing that I noticed with sketching is that a lot of times if your initial lines are lighter, then you can kind of get away with just doing darker lines over them without having to erase your initial line, and it actually looks even better than it would if you just had the dark line. Something else that we can do to add a little more detail and kind of stylized look is to add curves on the inside of the points like this. This kind of gives it more of an elfish, or maybe sort of a Book of Kells kind of look, I think. I might even add a point to a loop to make it match. We're also going to want to add tails to the ends of any lines that are free hanging. So the basic one that I do is just a little curl at the end. It's kind of like a circle Another option is you can just taper the line down to a point. You can also do something like kind of a clover leaf, which is a bit more Celtic looking. I've also seen this shape in some Viking and medieval work. That's sort of a taper, but with like a little circle attached to it. Although this ends up looking a little weird. So I'm just going to stick with my usual curl. It looks best if the top is really curving over like this. All right, time for step 3. Over, under. And I say this because this is my sort of mantra as I am doing this step. Over, under, over, under. So just choose a spot on the design. It doesn't really matter where. It can be at the bottom or the top. I'm going to go with the center part. And you're going to make one of the parts go over the other. Like so. Now follow along that strand, and the next time it crosses with another line, you make it go under. You can pick any strand and switch between strands. Just make sure that they connect back to that original intersection that you started with. So here I'm going over since before it went under. Now if I look at this thicker line, it's going under here, so it can go over here. At the beginning of a design, especially at these more busy parts, I tend to switch back and forth between the strands that I follow, but eventually you're going to want to sort of pick one and stick with it. And under, and then over, then under. When you reach the end of a line like that, just find another spot and start again. Over and under and over, etc. Now occasionally, even I will make a mistake. So here, I accidentally went over twice. And when you look at it, you're like, oh, wait a minute. That doesn't look quite right. These two parts go over. So just erase it again and fix it. To avoid making these mistakes, it's really better to just pick one line and follow it all over if you can. You want to make sure that you never ever skip ahead to some random part of the design that doesn't connect back yet to your original intersection, because then you might make some lines going over when they should be going under. And when you connect those two parts together later, you're gonna realize that your over-under pattern is completely messed up. However, if you follow a single strand, and you go over and under, then you'll find that when your strands connect back up, in the end, they will all follow the same pattern. This is also sort of your last chance to touch up the design to really even out points and make sure that everything is really beautiful. I find that really dark edges add a lot, so going over everything that might be kind of lighter, making a little darker, you can kind of erase out some of the lighter lines that you might have been using as guides earlier. If you're doing this as a pencil drawing, you might want to start doing shading at this point. I'm usually doing this for leather, so I do the shading with my leather working tools. And there you have it. This is how you can create your own Celtic knotwork designs from scratch.